Today, we'll take a look at life after death. We will examine 3 questions. The first one is, do we have an eternal soul or spirit self? The second is, what is life in the next world like? And the third question is, where do we end up in the world beyond? Let us then begin with our eternal soul. To understand us human beings, we must understand God, who created us. God has both an inner nature, that is his heart and mind, and an outer being, the very energy that makes up God. The human beings are created in God's image, to have a relationship to him. In our earthly life, therefore, we have an outer part, our physical self, and an inner part, called the soul or the spirit self. We use the term spirit self to emphasize that it is one's eternal self. You are your spirit self for all eternity with the personality you developed while on earth. You are not your physical self, which is something you only have during the earthly part of your life. In your physical lifetime, your spirit self not only exists within your physical self, but is meant to grow and develop based on it. As mentioned, we are created in God's image with an inner part, the mind or soul, and an outer part, the physical body. But also the big macrocosm we live in, the universe, is created after the same pattern, with an inner part, the spirit world, and an outer part, the physical world. From the energy within his own being, God created the energy and the matter which the physical world consists of. The resultant world consists of various distinct kingdoms, for instance the mineral, plant and animal kingdoms. From the energy within his own being, God also created the spiritual energy which the spirit world consists of. Also in that world there are distinct kingdoms. Therefore in the world beyond you'll find beings that have not lived here on the earth, angels, and human beings, our ancestors who came to the spirit world when their earthly life came to an end. God created the spirit world and the physical world to exist in harmony with each other, and for there to be a natural relationship between the two worlds. Our spirit self and physical self are also created to have a harmonious relationship to each other. Because the first human beings fell, and because evil took over the world, everything was turned upside down. The human beings fell to such a low spiritual state that the physical world and the spiritual world lost their connection. The human body is in many ways not so different from the bodies of animals and has the same basic instincts. Those physical instincts make us satisfy our needs for food and water, sleep, physical well-being, and sex. Our instincts are all about self-preservation. The physical body is, in other words, self-focused. The spirit self, however, is concerned with eternal values like love, friendship, truth, goodness, and peace. That something is invisible does not mean that it doesn't exist. We cannot see electromagnetic waves, but still we know that they exist. A TV antenna is, however, able to pick them up, and the TV itself transforms them to picture and sound. In the same way, the human spirit is able to perceive the invisible God. Your spirit self consists of spiritual energy and has therefore the ability to perceive a world which also consists of spiritual energy. Your spirit self exists in a spiritual reality. Because you spend eternity in a spiritual reality, it can be said to be more real than physical reality. The physical world is a world of time and space. We live within time and space and are limited by time and space. We live in the present moment and cannot move outside it. In addition, in this very moment you find yourself at a certain location, whether it be at home, in your living room, on a train, or at your workplace. If you want to move to another location, it'll take time, and you must either use your legs, jump on a metro, or take a plane. The physical world is therefore a world full of limitations. Eternity is, however, a radically different reality. There you are not limited by time and space. You may therefore relive things that happened in the past. In the world after this one, you may also move by means of the sheer power of thought or love. If you think of somebody or are fond of someone, you may instantly be together with that person. In addition, because the spirit world is beyond time and space, you do not age there. If you develop your spirit and ability to love here on earth, the eternal world will become a world of limitless possibilities. Should you, however, not develop your spirit and your ability to love during your lifetime here, you'll be very restricted indeed in the next world. That is why religion describes the lower realms called hell in the spirit world as a prison. Through our 5 physical senses, we perceive the physical world. We see, hear, smell, taste and feel the world around us. God created us, however, also with 5 spiritual senses. Because of that, you will perceive the spiritual reality when you one day leave this world. Then you will be able to see, hear, smell, taste and feel a world which is just as real as this one, if not more. Some people have the ability to perceive spiritual reality already during their earthly life. We call them mediums. Today, more and more people have spiritual experiences. Millions of men and women all over the world have had near-death experiences. We begin life in a water world, in the water skin of our mother's womb. After that, we live 70, 80, 90 years here in the physical world. In much the same way as your life in the mother's womb came to an end, so does your life here on the earth. But that does not mean that your life is all over. We continue to live in the eternal world. That way, we can divide our existence into 3 stages. We begin in the mother's womb, a world of water. Life there is a preparation for life in the new world we are born into, a spacious, light world surrounded by an atmosphere of air. Life in this world is a preparation for an eternal existence in the new world we are born into when we die, a world which is meant to be a world surrounded by an atmosphere of love. In the spirit world, your life is determined by the state of your mind or your heart. In the mother's womb, the unborn child develops sufficiently to cope with life in the physical world. In the cosmic mother's womb, which the physical world sometimes is called, you are meant to develop to a level where you become able to master life in the eternal spirit world. If you develop your mind and your ability to love here on the earth, there is nothing to fear at the time of death. Indeed, you ought to find yourself in a position where you can look forward to the day you enter a world without the many limitations which are part of life here on the earth. We human beings are in a unique position in the big macrocosm, our universe. First of all, you are a microcosm of the big macrocosm. The human physical self is a microcosm of the physical world and consists of exactly the same elements as the physical world it is surrounded by. At the same time, the human spirit self is a microcosm of the spirit world and consists of the same energy which the eternal world consists of. The big macrocosm is composed of two worlds, the spiritual one and the physical one. Human beings, likewise, are made up of the spirit self and the physical self. Another way to describe our position in the big macrocosm is the fact that we are created to govern both the physical world and the spirit world based on love. Thirdly, we are created to bind the two worlds together. In fact, we are the only beings that can do that, for the simple reason that we are the only ones with both a spirit self and a physical self. Angels only have a spirit self, while animals are physical beings, having a mind that is mainly instinctual. Indeed, it is the human spirit and the human mind that set us apart from the beings of the animal kingdom. The physical self needs nutrition from Mother Earth, food and water, but also heat and light from the sun as well as air from the atmosphere. When those conditions are met, physical life can develop. Likewise, for there to be spiritual life and development, certain conditions are required. It is not the sun, the air, nor the earth that provide those. Their source is God, the spiritual atmosphere we create, and the physical body. God is the source of love, truth, and goodness, which the atmosphere around us ought to be full of, and which we need for our spiritual growth. The physical body produces other conditions vital for one's spiritual life and development. If you do good deeds, your spirit self receives good spiritual energy. If you do evil and selfish deeds, your spirit self receives energy on a low level. It is therefore most important what kind of life you lead. If you live a selfish life, you will not be very comfortable in the world after this one. But if you live for others and think more of them than yourself, and think more of God than yourself, you will develop a spirit which feels at home in the spirit world. The relationship between the spiritual self and the physical self may be compared to the relationship between a tree and its fruit. The tree receives nutrition from the soil in order to produce fruit. The purpose of the tree is to produce ripe fruit. It is the fruit that is being harvested. In the same way, your physical self receives the nutrition it needs in order to yield good fruit. The fruit of your physical self is your eternal spirit self. It is your spirit which is being harvested when you grow old and reach life's autumn. Your spirit self is the harvest you get in the world hereafter. Your spirit self only develops based on your physical self. Indeed, the purpose of your physical self is to produce good energy for your spirit self so that you develop a good and mature spirit. And last but not least, your destiny in the spirit world depends on how you live here in the physical world. Let us briefly look at the required restoration process everyone's spirit self must pass through. God's ideal for humankind was to develop spiritually and attain spiritual maturity. God wanted, in other words, that we reach the maturity required to be able to live in harmony with God, our fellow human beings, and both our physical and spiritual surroundings. However, the first human beings disobeyed God and fell to a state far removed from such a maturity, to a very low spiritual level indeed. Religion describes their condition as being spiritually dead. Throughout history, saints and sages have established a spiritual foundation upon which it has gradually become possible to attain higher levels of spiritual maturity. According to the Bible, the first man and woman would die if they ate of the forbidden fruit. It was not, however, physical death which came into the world because they disobeyed God. Indeed, Adam and Eve continued to live to a ripe old age in spite of eating the very fruit that would make them die. The human physical body is subject to the physical laws. Like all other living organisms in the physical world, the human body does not last forever and cannot possibly do so. That would be in violation of the natural laws. And according to the words spoken at Christian funerals, from dust you came and to dust you shall return, the physical body turns into soil after death. That is completely in accordance with nature's laws. You are not your body. You only have your body a certain number of years here on the earth. The body is something temporary. You are your eternal spirit. It was the human spirit that suffered death when the first man and woman ate of the forbidden fruit. That the human spirit died means it fell to a very low spiritual level, separated from God. Because of the human fall, a world came into being where the necessary conditions for spiritual life and growth were not present. Because the first two human beings followed the rebellious angel Lucifer, their path to spiritual maturity was blocked, the maturity they would have needed in order to create the kind of world God wanted them to create, both here in the physical world and in the world after death. Another result of the fall is that the 5 spiritual senses God created us with became blocked and ceased to function during earthly life, leaving us with only 5 physical senses. What determines where we end up in the spirit world is what kind of life we live here on earth. As mentioned, one requirement for spiritual life and development is an atmosphere full of love, truth and goodness. Another requirement is to use one's physical body to do good deeds. That means that we must lead a life where we serve and love God, our fellow human beings and nature around us. We must live a life where we think more of others and do more for others than ourselves. It is such a life which makes us grow spiritually, so that we one day will be able to live in a world where God is the center. It is such a process we are meant to go through. In history, no one has managed to complete such a process. Instead, human life became full of selfish actions. If we live a self-centered life, it is impossible to grow spiritually. We remain on a low spiritual level. One reason that many live a selfish life is that they don't understand spiritual reality. If they had realized that a self-centered life here on earth will have disastrous consequences for one's life in the world hereafter, many would probably begin to think of God and their fellow human beings and do things for them. When you start to understand spiritual reality and live according to spiritual laws, you're on the right track. Thank you, and God bless you.